And this is the Rydeen CM-APL5 backup camera with active reverse guidelines. So these guidelines actually turn when your vehicle turns to help you with parking. What's also pretty interesting is that it does not require a complex installation, does not require tapping into the steering wheel of the vehicle. This installs like any other rear camera in the back of the vehicle, literally peel and stick, because the guidelines are built in inside of the camera. So in this video, I'm gonna test out the active reverse guidelines in a couple different scenarios so we can see how well they actually work. And I'm also gonna show you what the camera looks like at night. That way you can determine if this is the right setup for you. And I placed a link in the description down below to this camera if you'd like to get one for yourself, including a discount code to save you a little money when ordering one. And as far as mounting, this can be peeled back and the camera can be applied to a vehicle surface. If you wanted an even more permanent solution, they also included 2 screws in case you wanted to secure that to the surface of the car. Once mounted, the camera view angle can also be adjusted. And this is the cable that's gonna provide power to the camera. Now, one of the ends is gonna go to power and the other end is the output for the video signal. Also included is this camera extension, quite long. One end is gonna go to the head unit or monitor and the other end is gonna go to the camera. And here's a typical setup. Notice what happens when I put the vehicle in reverse. We are shown the rear view of the vehicle and we get reversing guidelines. This is what we call parking assist. Now, the reverse guidelines are made up of 2 parts. The white lines, which indicate our vehicle, and then the color lines, which indicate the proximity to our vehicle. So I'm gonna use the color lines to avoid hitting either the sidewalk or, in this particular case, this vehicle as I begin to back up. And notice how I'm looking at these lines and I'm following them, making sure that I don't get too close to the sidewalk. And I'm gonna see how close I can get to this vehicle. Now, a couple interesting things right now. The sun is facing towards us, so we're getting a shadow right here. So I wanted to do this test so we can see how much detail there is when you are in such a situation. And that's probably as comfortable as I feel backing up right here. And you can see on here that you can still see the red line where it ends and also where the bumper for the vehicle behind us begins. Now, a cool thing about this head unit that I have the camera connected to is that it does allow me to bring up the reversing camera independently of the parking assist feature. I can just select that icon and it's gonna bring up the camera. Now, I'm not sure why you will wanna do this, but this allows you to drive with the rear camera on. So now I'm driving forward and I have the rear camera on, again, because this particular stereo allows me to turn on that rear view at any point in time manually. So I flip the vehicle around, so now the rear camera is facing towards the sun. And now we can see on here that the shadow that we originally saw when the vehicle was flipped around is gone. And I wanted to do this test both ways. That way we can see the performance both with the sun facing towards the rear camera and with the sun facing the opposite side of the rear camera, basically where it creates a shadow. But now let's look at the active guidelines. If I begin to back up straight, nothing is gonna happen. But if I turn the vehicle, those lines eventually begin to turn. Basically, the rear camera is detecting that I'm turning, and I'm gonna use that to park into the spot. And again, I'm gonna use this line right here to gauge how close I'm gonna get to the sidewalk. Now, normally active guidelines on a vehicle turn when you turn the steering wheel. In this particular case, they don't turn when I turn the steering wheel because there's nothing connected from the camera to the steering wheel to know that the guidelines should turn. The guidelines are basically turning just by sensing that the car is turning. And again, I'm gonna use that to back up into the spot right here. So they sense when you turn and they sense when you stop turning. There we go. And that's probably the only drawback of a system like this that does not interact with the steering wheel, is that if you begin to turn, the guidelines are gonna turn, but all of a sudden, if you happen to stop, the guidelines turn straight, even though I am still technically turning. Once I begin turning, the guidelines again eventually resume turning. So the guidelines are not gonna stay in the turning position just because your vehicle is turning. The guidelines do that based on the feel of movement of your car that is turning. Not a big deal, especially considering that this installation is basically super easy versus the complexity of connecting something from the guidelines to the steering wheel, which will be a lot more difficult and probably even pricier. And let's also try to back up into this driveway. I'm going straight, so the guidelines are straight. And now I'm gonna begin to turn. And there we go, going up into the driveway. And as I begin to move straight, the guidelines do return to that straight position. Let's also attempt some parallel parking. Not bad. And here's what the system looks like at night. Now, first off, every time you are reversing, your vehicle is likely going to have reverse lights that come on, and that helps to illuminate the way. Even though this is a dark street, those lights do help. Additionally, every time I step on the brake, you get brake lights. So again, that provides additional light. So I'm going to use the reversing guidelines, and I'm using both this side right here to gauge how close I am to the sidewalk, and I'm using this right here to estimate how close I'm approaching an object, and I'm gonna see how close I can get to this particular object right here, and that is about as close as I feel comfortable going to. And here's what it looks like without a vehicle behind you. Again, you got the reversing lights helping us light up the way, and I'm using these lines right here to gauge the distance between the sidewalk and my vehicle. And as long as I maintain that space, I'm able to make sure that I don't hit the sidewalk or any other object. And your head unit may also have this function where you're able to adjust the brightness, contrast, and saturation of the rear camera view. So this is not the brightness of the screen, this is the brightness of the rear camera. And in this particular case, I like to have it somewhere in the middle, but you could lower that if you find it too bright, or you could increase that if you find it too dark. I like somewhere about here. And same thing, you can play with the contrast. That way you can find that sweet spot that you like. And the display that you choose to use with this camera sometimes also has adjustment capability. So one of them would be to flip the image. Notice where the sidewalk is at, and notice what happens if I tweak that. In this particular case, on this unit, I'm gonna go to cameras, and then for the rear camera, I'm gonna enable rear view mirroring. And if I go back to the rear camera, notice that the view has been flipped horizontally and the sidewalk is now on the opposite side. Now this is convenient if this camera were to be mounted in the front of the vehicle as opposed to the rear. Sometimes flipping the image will be required in order for the image to show correctly. Now I would recommend that the camera be installed in the middle of the vehicle, whether this is being installed on the front of the car or the rear of the car. Placing it in the middle is going to give you the most potentially accurate representation of those reverse guidelines in terms of then matching up correctly with your vehicle. If you offset the camera like this, those guidelines are not gonna fall in the correct place. Now this camera that is offset, this is for my LCD mirror. On an LCD mirror, this is not too much of a big deal. You can almost not even tell that it's offset, but for the best performance of the reverse guidelines, I really think this should be placed right in the middle. The other thing you may be curious about is how I got the cable to come out all the way to the back of the vehicle. I have another video showing the process of how I route the cable all the way to the back, and then how I get the cable out from the trunk out to the outside of the vehicle. I'll put a link to that in the description down below. And the Rydeen M7000 AHD monitor would be a good choice to run this camera with, because this guy allows you to run an additional camera for even more coverage. I have already reviewed this monitor on the channel. If you guys want to see that, I'll put a link to that video in the description down below. But this also works with aftermarket stereos that have an RCA input, like the Atoto head unit that you saw me use on this video. I have already reviewed that that stereo on the channel. If you guys want to check that out, I'll put a link to that video in the description down below. And I'm also going to put a link down there to this camera in case you'd like to look at it further or acquire one for yourself. And if you guys have any other questions regarding this, please put that in the comments down below. If you found any part of this video helpful, make sure you hit the like button to support the channel, and stay tuned as I have a lot more reviews coming up. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.